My son slapped me. Right across the face. It wasn't loud, but it felt like a gun went off. My mouth tasted like blood. The tension at the dinner table had been building all evening, thick and heavy, like a storm was coming. No one had said anything yet, but we all felt it. The smiles were fake, and even the jokes felt sharp, like they were meant to hurt. I just knew something bad was going to happen, I just didn't know it would be Mark. It wasn't the slap that shocked me the most. It was how easily he did it. No hesitation. No guilt. Just stood there, napkin in one hand, the other still hanging in the air like he'd swatted a bug. And then, laughter. Not everyone, not all at once. Just a few awkward chuckles. Jolene giggled behind her champagne glass like she wasn't sure if it really happened. Mark's boss let out a low whistle like he was impressed. Even the twins, my grandkids, shifted in their seats, pretending they hadn't seen a thing. And what had I said? What was so awful? All I did was smile and tell Jolene, that dress reminds me of one I wore back in '84. You look like a movie star. That was it. That was what lit the fire. Her face changed, like she'd just tightened a drawstring. She leaned in, whispered something to Mark, and then came the slap. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lifted my hand and touched my cheek. It was warm. But not just from the slap, it was the kind of warmth you feel when you finally realize someone you love doesn't see you as someone worth protecting anymore. I looked at Mark, not the boy I raised, not the man I gave up so much for, but a stranger. Somewhere along the line, he'd rewritten who we were. Jolene gave this big dramatic sigh and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, she's always trying to make everything about her. The people I used to call family looked away. One guest cleared his throat. Someone poured more wine. But no one, looked me in the eye. I folded the napkin in my lap. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. I turned to Mark, looked him straight in the face, and said calmly, quiet as dusk. I see it's time. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a drink. I didn't beg. I just stood up, lifted my chin, and adjusted the string of pearls around my neck, the same ones I wore when I signed the papers that let him go to college without a penny of debt. The silence at the table was louder than any slap. My cheek still burned, but something deeper had lit up inside me. Not anger. Not sadness. Something older. Wiser. I placed my napkin next to my untouched plate, looked once more at the boy I once would have taken a bullet for, and I left. I hadn't thought about that night in years. But standing outside the restaurant, cold wind biting through my blouse, it all came rushing back, like it happened yesterday. Mark was just 16. I remember the landline ringing, it shook the wall back then. It was almost midnight, and my heart jumped before I even picked it up. Mrs. Delaney, the officer said, you'll want to come down to the station. Just like that, my whole world shifted. Mark had been arrested. Not for a little weed or teen trouble, but cocaine. Bagged, labeled, and found all over the car. In the glove box. His coat pocket. Even behind the visor. It was a felony. I drove down there in slippers, no makeup, no bra, just panic pushing me forward. When I got there, Mark was curled up in the corner of the holding cell, trying to look tough, but I could see it, he was falling apart. The detective laid it out, if this goes to court, he's looking at prison. Not juvenile detention. Prison. And then I did something I never told anyone. I looked the officer dead in the eye and said, it's mine. He blinked. Excuse me? I repeated it, calm and steady. The drugs. They're mine. That's my car. That's my coat. I forgot the stuff was even in there. The room went silent. So quiet I could hear the vending machine humming in the hallway. The officer raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you want to say that, ma'am? The officer asked. I nodded. If you check my record, you'll see, I've never even had a speeding ticket. They believed me. And just like that, Mark walked free. Me? I got a fine, a warning, and a criminal record that got sealed up before it ever saw daylight. That was thanks to a favor from an old church elder, one who still owed my late husband for helping him keep his house back in '82. But don't get it twisted, my life changed that night. Mark never brought it up again. Never asked what it cost me. And I never told anyone. Not my sister. Not my pastor. Not even Evelyn, and she would have carried it to her grave. I thought staying silent was the same as protecting him. I thought sacrifice meant love. Funny thing about sacrifice, though, it doesn't always feel like bleeding. Sometimes it's like swallowing broken glass with a smile on your face. It cuts you slowly, for years. That night stayed buried deep inside me, until tonight, when Mark raised his hand to me like I was some kind of problem he was tired of dealing with. And all I could think was, he really doesn't remember what I gave up for him. But I do. I remember every second. Every lie I told to keep him safe. And for the first time, standing there under that cold, heartless moon, I didn't regret what I did. But I did regret staying silent for so long. The following Monday, I lost my job. 15 years at the county clerk's office, gone. It wasn't fancy work, but it paid the bills and kept the lights on through all the hard times. Mr. Langley, my boss, couldn't even look me in the eye when he handed me the envelope. "We just don't want any disruptions," he muttered. I'd worn pearls that day. Thought maybe if I looked put together, no one would see the shame. But pearls don't hide whispers. And in a small town, rumors move faster than the truth. By Friday, Mrs. Alder from church pulled me aside and gently suggested I take a break from organizing the Easter bake sale. "You've been through a lot, Doreen. Maybe take some time to reflect," she said with that smile that didn't reach her eyes. Reflect on what? My loyalty? My shame? How I lit a match to my own life for a boy who came home that same night, tossed his backpack on the table, and asked, "What's for dinner?" At the grocery store, people turned their carts away. At the salon, Janet accidentally skipped my appointment 3 times in a row. The first time, I held my head high. The second, I laughed it off. The third, I sat in my car and cried until my throat hurt. No one ever asked what happened. No one ever asked if I was okay. They'd made up their minds. I was that woman, a walking cautionary tale in lipstick and loafers. I stopped going out unless I had to. Bills got paid late. Groceries got lighter. I picked up quiet cleaning jobs where no one knew my name. I kept Mark in school. I packed his lunches. I smiled through every parent-teacher meeting like I wasn't falling apart inside. And even when he came home drunk, reeking of cheap beer and fake apologies, I didn't say a word. Not even when Jolene showed up at 19 with big dreams from a box store and a sharp tongue. Not when Mark brought home his college acceptance letter and hugged me like he'd climbed Everest. I smiled. I cheered. I wrote the checks. Sold my mother's heirloom brooch to cover his deposit. When people asked where the money came from, I said, "Oh, I just made it work." Because that's what mothers do, right? We make it work, even if it means slowly erasing ourselves one quiet piece at a time. They say love is patient and kind. But sometimes, love is a woman on her knees at dawn, scrubbing someone else's floors. Counting pennies behind closed doors. Swallowing her pride. So someone else never has to. At that birthday dinner, Evelyn sat 2 seats down from me. She clutched her purse a little tighter than usual. She barely spoke, just sipped her club soda while Jolene went on about her wellness collective like it was some $1 million empire. When Mark slapped me, Evelyn didn't cry out. She didn't jump to my side. She just stared, eyes wide. Lips pressed tight like a thread pulled too far. But I saw it. Her hand, just a flicker. It moved toward her coat pocket. Like it remembered something before her mind did. The tape. It was still there. And we both knew it. The night I told Evelyn everything, I was sitting at her kitchen table, crying into one of her lemon-stitched napkins. Her house always smelled like cinnamon and floor polish, like someone trying to keep things warm, even as life wore things down. We'd been friends since our boys were in preschool. Mark and her son Taryn used to dig holes in her flower beds and call them bug pits. But that night, there were no laughs. I just couldn't hold it in anymore. The weight of it, years of silence, guilt, and pretending, came pouring out like rain from a broken gutter. "I lied to the police," I whispered. Evelyn blinked. She didn't speak. Evelyn never rushed a woman in pain. "It was Mark's," I told her. "The drugs. He was going to prison. And I couldn't let that be his story. So I said they were mine." Still, she didn't say anything. She just reached across the table and placed her hand gently on mine. After a while, she asked, soft as a whisper, "You want some tea, baby?" I nodded. I couldn't say thank you without falling completely apart. That's when I noticed the small red light blinking under the bread box, her old voice recorder from back when she worked as a court typist. My heart nearly stopped. "Evelyn? Were you recording me?" She didn't flinch. Just said, "Only because I knew you'd never tell it again. And the world might need to hear it someday." I didn't argue. I couldn't. I just nodded, tears blurring everything. After that night, she locked that recorder in her safe. But tonight, at dinner, I saw her reach into her coat pocket when things turned cold and cruel. When Jolene raised her voice. When Mark raised his hand. When the room went quiet and oily with tension. Evelyn's fingers rested on that recorder, not to show it off or threaten anyone. Just as a quiet reminder to both of us, the truth wasn't floating in the dark anymore. It had a voice. It had weight. And I didn't have to carry it alone. Anymore. "Jolene's expanding into skincare now," Mark said proudly from the head of the table, swirling his wine like he just closed a $1 billion deal. "She's got this retinol rose thing the girls at work love." Jolene giggled and brushed fake lint off her shoulder. Oh, it's just a little side hustle, she said sweetly. We launched with $10,000 in seed money, just enough to get started. $10,000. I stirred my glass of water slowly. The lemon wedge floated on top, quiet, like it knew better than to make waves. That money came from my grandmother's tea set. Sterling silver. Beautiful edges, hand-carved. The kind of set folks used to polish every Sunday before church. I had kept it wrapped in linen for years, planning to pass it down to someone who'd love it. But I sold it. Took it to a man named Lewis at a little estate shop 2 towns over. He gave me $9,200 and a long, knowing look, like he could see I wasn't just giving up silver. I made up the rest by cutting groceries that month. Told Jolene I'd found some old bonds. She didn't even ask what kind. And now she sat there acting like the money fell from the sky. Mark started telling a story about his MBA. Man, I'll never forget that last semester, he said. Living on ramen, studying until 3 a.m. But it paid off. Everyone nodded, smiling politely like they were listening. None of them knew I'd worked nights at the dry cleaner for 2 years to cover his tuition gap. Came home smelling like starch and cleaning chemicals, lungs aching from steam. I mentioned once how loud the machines were. Mark just waved it off. Should have found a quieter job, Mom. I didn't know what I expected. Gratitude? A kind word? Anything more than the tight little nod he always gave when the check cleared. I used to tell myself, it's not about thanks. It's about love. But love that only goes one way? That's not love. That's drowning. Jolene smiled, sipping her wine, and said, we're thinking of buying a lake house. Somewhere private. So the kids can unplug. You know, real wealth is generational. My fork froze midair. Real wealth is generational. She had no idea. None of them did. They didn't know I sold my wedding ring during the crash in 2008 to cover Mark's rent after his startup failed. They didn't know I skipped getting my dental work done so Jolene could go on some fancy business retreat in Sedona. They didn't know the only vacation I ever took was one weekend in a cheap motel while they painted my bedroom, without asking. And when I came back, all my old photographs were gone from the walls. We thought it was time for something more modern, Jolene had said. I just nodded. Like I always did. I looked around that table, then at the laughter. And suddenly, it felt like I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was just the scaffolding they used to build theirs. The plates were full, the fancy glasses on the table used to be mine, and yet, I felt like a ghost at my own funeral. I didn't say a word, but deep down, something old and heavy woke up inside me. Something I'd pushed aside for years, buried under casserole dishes, school fees, quiet dinners, and that tired old line, it's fine, I'll take care of it. It wasn't anger I felt. It was memory, sharp and clear. People thought I was generous, but the truth is, I gave because they kept taking. And I let them, until now. I don't think they meant to erase me, at least not at first. It just happened slowly, like fog creeping in. You don't even notice until it's so thick, you can't see what's ahead. One Christmas, I realized. No one came by. That Easter, no one asked me to bring the deviled eggs. Then the photos started showing up online, Mark and Jolene at Disney, the twins blowing out candles, family trips, pumpkin patches, everyone in matching pajamas at Thanksgiving. But I wasn't in a single one. I scrolled through every picture like I was looking at a life I was supposed to be part of. One photo caption read, grateful for family. I stared at it so long my eyes burned. I'd been there for every diaper, every 3 a.m. fever, every slammed door and big milestone, but somehow, I'd disappeared. Nobody answered my calls. My texts were read, then ignored. I was always the one reaching out, never the one being reached for. And when I brought it up, you're being sensitive. You know how busy life gets. So life went on. And I went quiet. Only Evelyn noticed. Every Sunday, like clockwork, she showed up with flowers from her garden or a new kind of tea she thought I'd like. Just us girls, she'd say, settling on the couch like the old days, before the world got too loud. Sometimes we didn't even talk, just sat side by side, her knitting, me crocheting. It wasn't awkward silence. It was the kind that felt like being seen, like someone still knew I was there. One day, I told her I hadn't seen the twins in 3 months. Her eyes flicked up from her yarn. You want me to say what I'm thinking? She asked. No, I whispered. But I want you to stay while I feel it. She reached out, placed her hand on mine, warm, steady, real. And that's what I'd been missing. Not attention. Not praise. Just presence. Even before the slap, the real pain had already settled in, what it feels like to be replaced in your own life. I remember finding a note stuck on the fridge once, after a sleepover. One of the kids had written, thanks, Nana Evelyn. I didn't get angry. She was like a grandma to them. Honestly, she'd been there for them more than I had lately. But still, it stung. It told me what I'd been afraid to admit: there was no space for me anymore. If I cried, they called me dramatic. If I asked to be included, dramatic. If I mentioned everything I'd given up for them, very dramatic. It was their favorite word to shut me down. Little by little, they pushed me to the edge like an old photo in a fancy frame, still on display, but never really touched. And if Evelyn hadn't kept showing up, I might have started to believe them. That I was too much. Too needy. Too inconvenient. But Evelyn saw me. She always had. It all came to a head before the wine had even reached my lips. Mark sat there swirling his glass like he was born into fine living, not raised on Hamburger Helper and clipped coupons. Jolene leaned in close, her voice all sweet and fake. "Tell everyone that prison story again," she said with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "You do love your little tales." I froze, fork in hand. The table gave a polite, nervous chuckle. "I don't think," I started. "Oh come on," Jolene cut me off, tilting her head like I was a child. "You said it was just some silly mix-up. Surely you can laugh about it now." Mark didn't even blink. He just smirked and said, "God help me, maybe she liked it. Free meals. All the attention. Nice structure." Laughter again. A few awkward murmurs. I smiled, but not because it was funny. It was that tired smile women learn to wear, a smile for survival, not for joy. "Maybe so," I said softly. But under the table, my hand was shaking. I pressed it flat against my leg, tried to stop the tremble. I counted the stitches in the hem of my dress, 12 across, 3 down. I'd sewn it myself, back when I thought I'd wear it to Mark's graduation banquet. Not to my own public shaming. I could feel Evelyn watching me. And though she didn't say a word, I knew she saw everything. She didn't say anything, but her eyes burned. Not with anger, but with a quiet, loyal fire. I kept chewing, though I couldn't taste a thing. The food might as well have been gravel. That dinner plate in front of me, it was proof. Proof. That they hadn't just forgotten everything I'd done for them, they'd twisted it. Turned it into some funny little story. A joke. A moment to laugh about over wine. They didn't have the faintest idea what I'd lost, how much I'd gone through to keep their hands clean while mine were stained in silence. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream, "I lied for you. I bled for you." But I didn't. Because I'm a mother. And mothers? We learn to die in pieces. So instead, I reached for my water glass. I smiled, that same worn-out smile I always wore. My hand knocked the stem too hard, and the glass wobbled. Just a little. No one noticed. But I did. That moment, not the slap, that was when it happened. That tiny tremble in my fingers, the crack running down my spine. That was the break where the light started to slip in. And I thought, if you knew what I gave up to protect you, you'd fall to your knees begging for forgiveness. Instead, you laugh. I got up and went to the bathroom. I just needed a breath. Not a breakdown. Not tears. Not a scene like they probably expected. Just a few quiet minutes to hold myself together. The faucet dripped, the mirror was too bright, and when I looked at my face, I barely recognized her. My cheek still red where his hand had landed. My lipstick holding on like it was praying. I was fixing my necklace when I heard them. There was a vent in the wall, thin, cracked paint around the edge, and through it, I could hear their voices. Clearly. Jolene's voice was soft, smug. "She's slipping. Did you see her hand shaking?" Then Mark, just as casual as ever, "She's been off for months. Evelyn's the only thing holding her together." Then Jolene's voice changed, cold. Sharp. "We don't have to wait for nature to take its course. A few mistakes, a couple reports, and she's legally unfit. Once we have power of attorney," that phrase, power of attorney, rang in my ears like a funeral bell. Mark chuckled. "You make it sound shady, Jolene." "It's not shady," she replied. "It's smart. Just think about what she's sitting on, the house alone, plus her savings." Mark again, this time quieter. "She'll never sign it willingly." Then came the soft clinking of glasses. A toast. I stood there frozen, one hand gripping the sink, the other still holding my pearl necklace. They were celebrating. Celebrating. The idea of stealing my mind, my freedom, my future. Like I was just a wallet or a house they were waiting to inherit. Just a little paperwork, a few phone calls, and I'd be gone. But I didn't cry. I didn't rush in screaming. I just looked at myself in that mirror and saw the woman who had saved them more times than they'd ever know. And I said, under my breath, "Not this time. Let them think I was weak. Let them think I was losing it." They forgot, one of the most dangerous things in the world is a quiet woman who knows exactly where the truth is. And mine? Mine was sitting in Evelyn's pocket, on an old cassette tape. For the first time in a long time, I was ready to speak. The church was empty. Just the three of us. Evelyn had the keys. She always had them since she started helping the Reverend run the food pantry and organize rides for folks who needed dialysis. We didn't meet in the sanctuary. I wasn't ready for stained glass or angel statues. We met in the back office, just a folding table, an old coffee pot, and the truth sitting heavy between us. Reverend Thomas sat across from me. Kind eyes, sharp mind, the kind of man who doesn't look away when pain walks into the room. That morning I'd called and said, I need someone who remembers who I was before they made me feel small. He just said, come. Evelyn poured the coffee. I didn't drink mine. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out the cassette. It felt heavier than I remembered. That little plastic rectangle held the moment my life cracked open. I placed it on the table like a weapon. I told the truth once, I said, voice calm, but only in private. That ends today. Evelyn didn't flinch. She just slid a manila envelope across the table. It's all typed up, she said softly. Witnessed. Notarized. Legal. I made copies. I didn't know when you'd be ready, but I knew you would be. I looked at her, my only friend, my only witness, and thought, every woman needs one Evelyn. Just one. Someone who doesn't look away when the water gets cold. Reverend Thomas opened the envelope and began to read. Quiet filled the room. But this time, it wasn't silence meant to shut me out. It was the silence of people listening, finally. For a while, he didn't say anything. Then he looked at me and asked, do you want justice, or peace? I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like fresh rain after a wildfire. I want the truth, I told him. Let them do what they want with it. I'm done hiding. He nodded slowly, like he understood the weight of those words. Then he folded the transcript, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and said, then we'll speak loudly. Evelyn placed her hand over mine. It was warm, steady, a quiet promise. For a moment, we just sat there. 3 people. 1 truth. And the soft ticking of an old heater behind us. I didn't know exactly what would come next. But I knew this, the first time I protected Mark, it cost me everything. This time, I was protecting myself. And that felt sacred in a whole different way. When I walked into my lawyer's office, he looked up in surprise. Mrs. Delaney, he said, straightening his back a little. I wasn't expecting you today. I smiled the way older women do when they're about to shake the world up. Pull the file, I said, setting down my handbag like it was light. Even though it carried the weight of generations. We're changing everything. He blinked, then adjusted his glasses. Everything? Every line, I said. Especially the will. The office still smelled like lemon polish and leather, just like it had when I signed the house deed, when I opened Mark's college fund, when I buried my husband and started over. But this visit was different. I wasn't here for small changes. I was here to cut the cord. We sat for over an hour. I told him I wanted to sell the house, and I wanted every single dollar to go to a youth program for kids like Mark used to be. But Mark's your beneficiary, he said carefully. He was, I answered. Not anymore. And the grandkids? He asked. Bless their little hearts, I said gently, but their hands are already full of things I paid for. They'll be fine. We added one more clause, Evelyn would oversee the final distribution. And we included a clear statement, no funds shall be given to anyone who has tried to control or manipulate the grantor's independence, through pressure, coercion, or legal action. Do you want me to notify the family? My lawyer asked. I smiled. Oh, no, sugar. I'll handle that myself. When? He asked. Pen paused. Very soon, I said. That same afternoon, I called Jolene and left a message, on speakerphone. I'm planning a Sunday brunch, I said, my voice sweet and smooth but with a sharp edge. Just family. One last gathering before I start traveling. I could almost hear her smiling through the phone, probably already picturing mimosas. And another fat check. Good. That whole week, I got ready, not for a fight. For closure. I picked out my favorite china, the pale blue set with the little roses. I cooked everything myself, peach scones, rosemary quiche, lemon tartlets with fresh cream. I ironed the napkins, polished the silver, and laid each place. Setting like it was a prayer. I even wore my best navy dress, the one with the scalloped collar, and pinned on my mother's old brooch. I curled my hair the night before and sat under the dryer like it was 1963. Not to impress anyone. But to remember who I was before they chipped away at me. On every name card, I wrote their names by hand. A little flourish under each E. Like I was still the hostess they expected me to be. But this time I was throwing the party for me. A goodbye party. They didn't know it yet, but that brunch was my last supper. And oh, honey, they came hungry. 2 nights before the brunch, the church held a big gala. I wore an ivory knit dress with little pearls at the collar. The kind of dress that whispers quiet dignity from across the room. People hugged me, kissed my cheek, told me how lovely I looked. Even Jolene, with her usual backhanded charm. "You look so rested," she said. Like peace was just a trick I'd finally learned how to fake. Mark handed me a glass of sparkling cider, kissed the air beside my cheek. "Glad you're feeling better, Mom." Better? He had no idea. I wasn't better. I was free. And I was finally done mistaking politeness for love. Reverend Thomas stood at the mic, thanking the volunteers. Jolene clapped the loudest when her name was mentioned. Evelyn and I stood by the punch bowl, just watching. She leaned in, her voice low. "You ready?" she asked. I gave her a single nod. "They don't see it coming," she whispered, sipping her drink slow. "You've got the whole room fooled." I smiled, calm and steady. "Good." The music was playing softly, smooth jazz, nothing loud or flashy. People were starting to dance. Mark came over and asked if I wanted to join him for a spin on the dance floor. I said yes. He led me stiffly, like he was only doing it to be polite, not because he wanted to. But I let him. "Thanks for coming tonight," he said. "It means a lot to Jolene." Even now, even here, it was still about Jolene. She always came first. Mark twirled me once. My feet were sore, but I stood tall, like a ballerina trying to balance on old memories and grace. "It's nice to be seen," I said quietly. He didn't hear it. Of course he didn't. He just gave a little nod and looked at his watch, like he had somewhere more important to be. When the song ended, I turned to Evelyn. "I'm going home," I said softly. "I want to rest before Sunday." She took my hand and gave it a firm, comforting squeeze. "Don't you dare feel guilty," she said. "You've already waited longer than most women ever would." And she was right. I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Guilt is for women still holding on, still hoping. I wasn't hoping. I was letting go. The table was set. The storm had a name, and her name was Doreen. Sunday came, warm and calm. The kind of morning that almost makes you believe everything's okay again. The dining table looked beautiful. I'd used my old blue china with tiny rose prints. The linen napkins were folded like little swans. Tall glasses of mimosa were already sparkling. A peach-scented candle flickered in the middle, like a quiet prayer. Jolene was the first to walk in. She had her phone up, taking pictures. "Oh my gosh, this is gorgeous," she said. "We should do brunch like this more often." Mark followed behind her, his sunglasses still sitting on top of his head like always, like being sincere might give him a rash. The twins flopped into their chairs, already looking bored and asking if there was Wi-Fi. I sat down at the end of the table. Not at the head. Not today. Evelyn sat beside me, not a guest, but a steady anchor. The food was light and sweet. The room was filled with the gentle clinking of forks on plates and the sound of polite conversation. Then, when the dishes were cleared, I stood up. "I have something for each of you," I said, calm as a quiet Sunday church service. "Just a little gift to mark the day." I handed out envelopes one by one, thick cream-colored paper, each name written in my own handwriting. Mark took his with that smug half-smile he always wore. Jolene gasped softly, probably thinking it was a check or something fancy. Even the twins sat up a little straighter. They opened the envelopes, and then everything went quiet. Inside each one was a photo of Mark at 16, handcuffed in a police station. A copy of the original police report, drug possession, intent to sell, and a notarized transcript of my taped confession. You could even see Evelyn's handwriting in the margins, sharp and clear. Every word was legal. Every word was true. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and said nothing. I didn't need to. The silence said it all. Mark turned ghost pale. His lips moved, but nothing came out. Jolene stared at the photo, then the papers, her face twitching like she wasn't sure whether to scream or start planning damage control. The twins were frozen. Their phones forgotten. Just two kids staring at something they weren't supposed to see, and knowing it was real. "Mom?" Mark finally croaked, holding the paper like it was burning his hand. "What is this?" I didn't answer. I wasn't there to explain anything. I was there to tell the truth. Across the table, Evelyn sat straight and still, lifting her chin just a bit. Watching them like a hawk in pearls. Let them read. Let them feel. Let them sit in the mess they made. Because I was done cleaning it up for them. I was done making their shame feel soft and safe. Mark shot up from his chair, knocking it over. He clutched the paper like he could crush the truth just by crumpling it hard enough. "This is a lie," he shouted. "It's all twisted. She's trying to turn everyone against me." He turned to Jolene, waving the photo. "This is ancient history, it's nothing." But Jolene wasn't looking at the photo anymore. She was looking at me. And for the first time since she joined this family, she looked scared. "Tell them, Mom," Mark shouted. His voice cracked. "Tell them it's fake." Still, I said nothing. The twins stared at their envelopes, wide-eyed and quiet, like they'd just found a snake inside a birthday gift. The youngest whispered, "Dad, did you really?" Mark spun toward him. "Don't talk. You don't know what this is." That's when Reverend Thomas stood up. He'd been sitting at the far end of the table, invited by Evelyn. He hadn't said a word when the envelopes were passed out. Now, he reached into his coat, pulled out his own copy of the transcript, and read it aloud. "I took the blame so you'd have a future. And all I got in return was silence and a slap." His voice was steady. Strong. The words echoed through the room like something holy. Mark's mouth fell open. And for once, he had nothing to say. Jolene shook her head, wild and slow, like she couldn't believe what was happening. "She's doing this to control us," she said. "She's just angry, old and alone." "I'm not alone," I said, finally. The room froze. I didn't have to raise my voice. "But I used to be," I added quietly, folding my napkin with care. "Not anymore." Mark stepped forward. His face was full of panic, his eyes begging. "Mom, please, you don't have to do this. We can talk. We can fix this." I looked at him, not the man standing there, but the boy I once protected. With everything I had. My body, my name, my clean record. "You had every chance to fix this," I told him. "But you didn't. You stayed quiet. And you chose her." I nodded gently toward Jolene. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I protected you," I said, my voice soft, almost loving. "And all I asked was for you to remember." Mark sank into his chair like the floor had been ripped out from under him. And this time, nobody got up to help him. That's what happens when the show is over. The audience leaves. And the actors are left sitting in the truth. He was still sitting there, slumped and silent, when I stood up. I didn't have to yell. The whole room had already gone quiet. "I've taken you both out of my will," I said. Jolene gave a sharp, surprised laugh. "You're joking." I turned to her, slow and calm. From my purse, I pulled out a folded sheet of cream-colored paper. Legal paper. I placed it gently in front of her plate. "That's a copy of the updated trust," I said. "It's official. Starting now, everything I own will go to a youth program. One that helps kids like you once were, Mark, before you forgot what it meant to be saved." Her smile broke. Cracked like old paint. She glanced at the paper but didn't reach for it. "Is this because we made a few suggestions about your care?" she asked, her voice trying to sound sweet but shaking underneath. "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's because you made plans for my death while I was still sitting at your table." Mark stood again. This time, he was quieter. Palms open, voice gentler. "We were just worried, you've seemed tired." "We didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I cut in. "You meant every word. You meant to take, like you always have." I looked him in the eyes. And mine filled up, not with tears, but with memories. "I took the fall for you when you were 16. I erased your record so you could have a future. And it cost me everything. My job. My friends. My name. I never asked for anything in return, just your respect." Mark didn't say a word. Just swallowed hard. "And what did I get?" I asked, my voice trembling now, but not weak. "You slapped me. In front of your children. Because I embarrassed your wife." No one moved. Even the twins were completely still, staring at me like I'd cracked the sky open. "You've taken my money. My silence. My space. And still, you wanted more." I took a step back from the table and looked around the room one last time. "I don't owe you my silence anymore." That was it. That was all I needed to say. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't speaking to be believed. I was speaking to be done. When I stepped outside the restaurant, the sun hit my hair just right, made the silver strands shine like a crown. That's when I saw them. Cameras. Reporters. 3 news vans lined up across the street. Microphones ready. At first, I blinked. Thought maybe it was a wedding nearby, or some high school event. Then I saw Evelyn. She was standing by the curb, coat fluttering in the breeze. Arms crossed, proud as ever. She didn't look smug. She looked satisfied. One of the reporters rushed forward, eyes wide. "Mrs. Delaney," she said, breathless, "is it true you covered up your son's arrest in 1996? I didn't flinch. Didn't look back at the restaurant doors behind me. I just smiled, soft and full, like someone who finally stopped clenching her jaw in her sleep. "Let the truth set someone free," I said. I paused. Took a breath, the kind that feels earned. I already am. The reporter blinked, caught off guard by how calm I was. Then Evelyn walked over, heels clicking with quiet power. She opened the cab door waiting at the curb. It wasn't a black car or a fancy ride. Just a yellow cab, simple, certain, like me. I got in without saying another word. The cabbie asked, "Where to?" I handed him an envelope. Inside was a cruise ticket. 2 weeks along the Mediterranean. The name of the ship? Freedom. Evelyn stood on the sidewalk, waving at me with tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from joy. I didn't cry. I'd already shed enough tears over the years, alone in bedrooms, in cars parked outside churches, sitting quietly in pews. But not today. Today, I was headed somewhere new. Somewhere the salt in the air came from the ocean, not from old wounds. As the cab started to pull away, I glanced back one last time. The restaurant doors opened. There was Mark, standing in the doorway. He looked lost, stunned, scanning the street like he didn't know what to do next. And for once, I didn't reach for him. Instead, I reached into my purse. I found the little clasp, opened it, and gently tucked the past away, right where it belonged. Behind me.